Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ifat Adaya, and I work in the International Division of the Israel Innovation Authority on Government Relations and Program Management, and I look forward to this valuable webinar with our friends from the U.S. Department of Energy and the Trillion Parameter Consortium. I would like to invite Tammy Vershevsky, who heads the business development efforts in America and Europe at the Israel Innovation Authority, to share some opening remarks. Tammy, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to open this new avenue of collaboration with the DOE, the U.S. Department of Energy, and the Israel Innovation Authority to strengthen the ties between the Israeli research and tech ecosystem, the U.S., and the rest of the world. Worth to mention that apart from direct funding for bilateral and multinational collaboration, central part of what we are doing at the International Division at the Israel Innovation Authority is to connect the tech ecosystem with unique state-of-the-art global infrastructure and knowledge that can advance research and push global innovation forward. Well, it is well known that when challenges become bigger and more complex, no one country can move the needle alone, and that global research collaboration is crucial for innovation breakthrough. And this is exactly what we are here to introduce. The Trillion Meters initiatives created by the US DOE Argonne National Lab only a year ago as an open community focused on generative AI mission to advance science. And at a very short time, it was able to engage with growing number of other national labs, research institutes, academia, and industry partners across the US, Asia, Europe, Australia, and many other places, and to accumulate together unmatched capabilities for generative AI and AI research community. We find this in high synergy with the Israeli AI expertise in the field, and so we are confident that this event can bring mutual high value for stakeholders working in the fields in all sides. In this webinar, we intend to present the necessary basic information, create a space for further Q&A, and further on build a fruitful connection between our ecosystems and countries. So wishing you all good luck.
Thank you, Tammy. I would like to invite now John Michael, the Department of Energy Attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Israel, to share some opening remarks. John, over to you.
Thanks, Ifat. And thanks, Tammy, for opening things up. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Michael, the Department of Energy Attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, here in Israel. And I'm really pleased that we've partnered with the Innovation Authority and the Trillion Parameter Consortium to bring this webinar to you. I don't want to take too much time away from Charlie and his presentation, so I'll keep this short. You're probably wondering why I'm here and what my job as an energy attaché has to do with AI. Which is probably a fair question because there's not many energy attachés at U.S. embassies all over the world. As the Department of Energy attaché, I'm responsible for advancing U.S. national security and economic interests by supporting the development of U.S. Department of Energy policies, priorities, and initiatives with Israel. Most of the time, my work here is focused on longstanding relationships that the department has with the Ministry of Energy and other government agencies. I think Tammy mentioned the direct funded activities we do through the Binational Industrial Research and Development Foundation Bird Energy Program and the U.S. Israel Energy Center. And then occasionally we also get to explore new opportunities to expand our two countries' relationship, and that's what we're doing here today. Last May, the U.S. released an update to its National Artificial Intelligence Research and Development Strategic Plan. I don't want to go over the entire plan. It's on the internet, and I'm sure you all can look it up or may have already read it. But there is one sentence that stood out to me as particularly relevant for today's discussion. And it's in the section of the plan on international collaboration. It says, groundbreaking scientific research is an inherently collaborative and international activity. And I think that's a good way to frame today's webinar. A lot of people don't realize this, but DOE has been working on artificial intelligence since the 60s through the Advanced Scientific Computing Research Program. And today, the DOE Office of Science is investing in the infrastructure, high performance and exascale computing that will power future generations of AI. The Office of Science also supports other programs in DOE that are using AI to achieve their goals in multiple fields across all our labs. And that includes, today's discussion topic on how AI models can be applied to scientific discovery. So I don't want to go too much into specifics, partly because I am also here to learn more about the TPC, the Trillion Parameter Consortium. But I did want to quickly thank all of you for attending today, especially in light of all the challenges you may be dealing with right now. And I wanted to thank the Innovation Authority for hosting today's webinar, and of course, Charlie for making himself available to give Israel's AI community more information about the Trillion Parameter Consortium. And I think now I'll turn it over back to Yifat for our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Before we move on to our next speakers, I would like to give a special thank you to Leora Sidi from the Department of Energy at the U.S. Embassy in Israel. Their efforts helped to make this webinar happen. Thank you, Leora. And some logistics, please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A tab. We will address them towards the end of the webinar. And now I would like to invite Dr. Ziv Katzir, the head of Israel AI National Program at the Israel Innovation Authority, to provide us with a brief overview on the program. Ziv, over to you.
Right. Thank you, Yifat. It's really wonderful to see all of you guys here and this afternoon with a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with DOE. In the sake of time, I'm going to be very brief to allow Charlie most of the airtime. I'll say really very brief words about the Israel AI program. So our goal is to secure Israel's long-term standing and leadership on AI, and that's meaning a cross-cutting effort throughout the Israeli government, going from research in academia, private sector, implementation within the government itself, sandboxing, regulation, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. The program stands on 3 core pillars. One is a long-term strategy that combines all of those elements. Second is infrastructure, and third is providing an innovation-friendly operating environment. Really briefly, we treat the term infrastructure in a very broad way, supporting basic research, implemented research, encouraging talent both in the academia and the private sector, catering for the compute infrastructure needed for training large-scale models, traditional HPCs, and for developing compute infrastructure itself, that is innovation within the compute hardware, software, and so on and so forth, making data available for researchers across all domains, and finally, dealing with natural language processing for our local languages, that is Hebrew and Arabic. In terms of operating environments, we focus both on the implementation in the private sector, that is allowing our own government and public services to be smarter and more data related based on AI. And finally, creating sandboxes for testing AI technologies in those verticals that are regulated heavily and so have higher entry bars. I will thank you all for joining us once more. And would like to invite you all to meet us at the aiisrael.org.il, our website, to see more details about open calls for participation, different programs, the different chapters, and so on and so forth. Thank you,
Ziv.
Back to you.
Thank you, Ziv. Our next speaker is Dr. Charlie Catlett, Senior Computer Scientist at Argonne National Laboratory, Visiting Senior Scientist at the University of Chicago, and Acting Executive Director at the Trillion Parameter Consortium, to present the consortium and its research collaboration opportunities. Charlie, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining. As mentioned, I am from Argonne National Laboratory. Today, I'm here to talk about a broad initiative that includes all of the DOE laboratories, as well as many universities and companies around the world, the Trillion Parameter Consortium. I won't be talking about specific projects at Argonne, but I'll say that much of the work that has gone into our leadership in formation of TPC, of the Trillion Parameter Consortium, is related to our installation, which we're almost finished with, of the Aurora supercomputer, which is one of the most powerful machines in the world and designed specifically to train large-scale AI models. And so it is part of our motivation at Argonne as we see the amount of effort and computing resources that are required to build state-of-the-art AI. It was obvious that this is a kind of activity that could benefit and be accelerated by international collaboration. So I'm gonna share my screen here. And what I want to do is talk about the background and why we formed TPC, and then immediately get into what is it and how might you be involved. We'll have plenty of time for question and answer afterward. If you want to jot one into the chat space, one of my colleagues is going to be monitoring that, and then we'll have time for interactive chat later. So as I mentioned, and that means most of the institutions that we talk to, as well as our own, and then collectively as a community, want to build very powerful models for AI. We note that these models need to be exemplars of responsible AI with respect to ethics, transparency, safety, et cetera. And the consortium was formed to help us to do that. Part of our motivation as well is that to the degree that we know the data that is being used to train today's most powerful models, we're pretty certain that only a small percentage, perhaps 5%, of the data used to train these models is scientific data. So they're very intelligent models, depending on your definition of intelligent. I'll say they're very capable models, but we don't really understand yet to what degree we can train them to exhibit scientific reasoning or skills beyond what you can learn from general information about science. TPC really is a continuation of an effort that began back in 2019 with Argonne and Oak Ridge National Laboratory and Berkeley Lab to bring an international community together around looking at how AI could impact our science and accelerate our science. And so we had 4 workshops in 2019 hosted by the different laboratories, and then one in Washington, D.C., that involved about 1,200 scientists from industry, academia, and Department of Energy laboratories to sort of explore this question. And the resulting report was, it's 16 chapters, one per discipline: material science, energy, infrastructure, control, computer science, et cetera. And then, of course, the worldwide pandemic hit, and we all focused on that, or many of us focused on that for a while. And so we brought this community back together in 2022 with another 3 workshops. We added several more Department of Energy laboratories to organize it. And those workshops as well, about 1,200 people from around the world. This time we had more understanding of AI than we did in 2019, but also many things had changed, including the explosion of generative AI capabilities. And so it was timely for us to look back. And this report that you see on the right was published in 2023. And it's structured much differently. It starts with a section that talks about 6 different broad areas where we might use AI to accelerate science, things like digital twins and infrastructure or instrument control or foundation models or surrogate models. And then, of course, you can download either of those reports at the link there, or just search for DOE AI reports. You'll probably find the link. In 2023, then, in about February, at a regular meeting of many high-performance computing laboratories in Japan, who met in Japan from around the world, there was discussion about keeping this momentum going with these this community that had come together over the last several years and proposed this grassroots international consortium that we've called the Trillion Parameter Consortium. And Argonne hosted a kickoff meeting with about 150 people in August of 2023. Now I want to tell you what's happened since August and what is happening as we move forward with the Trillion Parameter Consortium. First of all, we have 3 specific goals, which the first is to build an open community, which we're well on the way of doing. The second is something that we're still working on and seeing some limited success so far, and that is to bring people together to facilitate the identification and incubation and support of multi-institutional international collaborations around challenging problems related to scientific AI. For this reason, many of the activities of the Trillion Parameter Consortium are happening within specific working groups that are addressing particular aspects of AI. And then the third goal is to create a global network of expertise and even resources that can facilitate those projects to work together. I mentioned that we have a goal of doing work that's an exemplar, that are exemplars of responsible AI, and by that we have some principles that we aspire to, which are transparency, fairness, and ethical practices. And so where we come together around these 3 goals and operating principles is the Grassroots Consortium of Trillion Parameter TPC. I've mentioned this large-scale AI for science, and it's moving so quickly that it's almost dated now to talk about the role of generative AI and large language models and transformer architectures, because we've moved into many other architectures that are promising beyond the foundation models. But we have used the foundation model as a concept for describing the goals of the Trillion Parameter Consortium. We are trying to build large-scale foundation models that can act as a scientific assistant to a scientist. And so that means training them with scientific data. It means downstream training to enable these models to act in specific ways, whether that's in inverse design or digital twins or scientific code optimization. So this is the sort of pictorial goal of the TPC, and you'll probably recognize the form of this diagram, which is borrowed from the Bomasani paper, Opportunities and Risks of Foundation Models. Now, TPC came together, as I mentioned, in this kickoff workshop a little over a year ago, and began to form discussions around specific topics, which have then turned into working groups, and each of these have a channel within a shared Slack workspace. So you can see that some of the in the middle are probably the most active working groups at this moment, which are ones looking at model architecture and the performance of training and inference, others looking at the scientific skills and the safety and trustworthiness of these models. A third working group is just looking at data preparation and pipelines for preparing training data for these models. You also see along the left-hand side a number of domain areas, and we have, candidly, we have looked and sort of been struggling to optimize the best way for a material scientist or a climate scientist to interact with the AI community in a way that's useful for their science. Many of them are pursuing the use of AI, whether with canned models from Hugging Face or just products like you can get access to on the web through chatbots. In the last few months, we have been increasingly talking with the leaders of these groups and their communities about a project we'd like to undertake in 2025, which I don't think I've even incorporated into these briefing slides yet. We were inspired by the Epic AI release of Frontier Math, which is a set of mathematics problems that are not open problems or solvable, but to solve them requires an expert mathematician to take hours or a couple of days to solve them. And the best models today, when tested with this set of mathematics challenge problems, were only able to get about 2% correct. So this notion of challenge problems from different areas of science, as I've talked to material scientists or physicists or environmental scientists, this is an opportunity from their point of view and from mine as well for them to work together to create a set of challenge problems for our different science disciplines that we can use to evaluate the scientific reasoning skills of models. So in 2025, we expect to see a lot of momentum going toward the creation of these challenge problems for evaluating AI. And then you can see, as I've been talking, the rapid growth of our Slack space, now over 1,200 people. Here are a couple of examples, and these slides will be available to you so you don't have to furiously take notes, but a couple of examples of descriptions of how we define a working group. So you can see that they have a fairly constrained set of topics that they are pursuing. We try to have at least 2 and ideally 3 leaders from multiple institutions that keep the discussions going and plan hackathons and other things for the group. And we expect that this will continue to grow into 2025. One of the things we also do with the Trillion Parameter Consortium is to provide a bi-weekly distinguished seminars series. I think on here, these are just the 2024 speakers, although one of these is for the Alex Schinker from Los Alamos, and the bottom left is January 15th. And then next week on the 18th, we have Philip Ball, who's a well-known writer, giving one of these lectures. These are 1 hour and 15-minute virtual meetings, just like this one on Zoom. And you can go to the TPC website and look at the schedule, or even subscribe to the calendar to get invitations to that series. And we will continue the series through 2025 and encourage you in this audience to contact me if you have a topic that you would like to present as part of that series. TPC, just talking organizationally, we are a grassroots informal organization. We don't have we're not a legal entity with a bylaws or 501(c)(3) or what have you. We are aspiring to have the lightest weight or sufficient management and organization, and not more than that, for this grassroots organization. We did feel that it was important early on for those organizations that were wanting their people to be involved in TPC to have a member program that simply allows organizations to make a statement to one another and to the consortium that they're in agreement on the goals and the principles of TPC. This is not a requirement for an individual scientist to get involved in TPC, but it is something that we encourage organizations to do. And I'll show a list of organizations. So there are about 90 organizations now from around the world. This is color-coded. Blue is North America, red is Europe, and then Asia Pacific is green. Again, an individual scientist can join, it's not a membership program, so they can participate in TPC without having to provide a letter like I showed, but organizations are encouraged to do so. Okay, so in the last year, we've done a number of different events that are designed to bring these groups together, and as I showed in the goals of TPC, identify and nurture these kind of collaborations. We did a tutorial and a birds of a feather in February in Sydney, Australia at Supercomputing Asia. In May, we held a workshop with invited talks at ISC HPC, the annual supercomputing event in Europe, with speakers from around the world, and a panel you see on the left-hand side there that talked about funding initiatives in Europe, and with some comments from Rick Stevens from Argonne there, the tallest person in the left-hand side, Satoshi Matsuoka from Japan on what was happening in other countries. And then we brought the entire community together, about 190 people in Barcelona in June, to have a broader workshop that had a day of tutorials, that had plenaries and breakout groups. And that drew, as it was a kickoff in Europe, it drew many people from Europe, about maybe 60% from Europe, quite a few from North America, and then some from Asia Pacific as well. If you break out the European section and you take Spain and the US, or if you break out the countries, take Spain and US out of the picture, you see, I thought there was, yes, there was at least one person from Israel there. But you can see, I think 15 countries that were involved in that meeting. In that broad workshop, many of the working groups kind of got their footing and began to meet multiple times and to develop plans for what they could do together. These are the 8 that some of them pre-existed, were formed before the Barcelona meeting. Others were formed at the Barcelona meeting and have continued to hold collaborative discussions in Slack and in-person meetings. A second thing that TPC is trying to do, is great to have these big workshops and have people talk to each other, but we also want to provide a venue for individual teams to meet and go deeper into what they're going to do together, make decisions together, divide up tasks. For example, I don't need to run the benchmarks XYZ against a model. If you're already doing that, I'll run a different one, and we'll, for the same amount of effort, get 2 sets of benchmarks run. And so that kind of collaboration is what we encourage in these working groups. 3 of them came together in October for 2.5 days at Argonne to have those kind of hands-on discussions. There was limited participation from remote, but for the most part, people were together in the room. And I wanted to give you an example of what one of the working groups did and aspired to do at a hackathon, because this is an example of how we expect our working groups to operate. So you can see this one is focused on scientific skills, safety, and trust evaluation. So there were a number of objectives that they had that they wanted to work through together during that time. This set of bullets on the left was translated into agenda, and then they had a set of outcomes that they reported at the end of 2.5 days. And this is an excerpt from the report that we did of the hackathon. And as I said, this is the kind of thing that we want to support at roughly a quarterly pace. So we're expecting beginning in 2025 to have quarterly hackathons, and I'll say more about that in a moment. Just a few weeks ago, we were at supercomputing. This was the largest supercomputing ever, I believe. There were almost 18,000 people there. 200 of them decided they would come to our workshop, which was a good number. And what we did for this workshop was to put a call for extended abstracts out to the entire TPC community. We have a mailing list that's got the 1,200 or so people. And we're asking for people to submit ongoing reports of ongoing work, not finished papers, but just what you're doing now and what you've accomplished in the last few months, with an emphasis on work that was multi-institutional and ideally international. So about half of the talks that you see that we accepted, we had 33 submissions, we accepted a dozen. About half of those were from multi-institutional international teams. And we expect, we've been approved, so we expect to do a full-day workshop. This was just a half-day workshop. We'll do a full-day workshop at Supercomputing Asia in mid-March, and we'll be proposing a workshop, the second annual, we hope, at ISC that will happen in June of 2025. So let me kind of wrap things up. I'm actually a little bit early, but that gives us more time for discussion, and I can come back to these slides or even show different ones. What's next as we move into 2025 is we expect to do once or twice a year these large-scale meetings, but to really focus on this quarterly pace of hands-on hackathons for groups of 20 to 25 people, and multiple of those getting together. So in 2025, the first week of March, we're doing a hackathon in Kobe, Japan, hosted by Riken. That one will have probably the same groups that met at the Argonne Hackathon, the data pipeline group, the skills evaluation and trust group, and the model architecture and performance group. Those three groups, there'll be a fourth group that we're organizing to bring together folks from the life sciences, bioinformatics, et cetera, who are using AI to see if we can use that community, which is already very active in TBC, to explore how we would engage scientific communities to create and curate these scientific challenge problems that I mentioned before. We will do as I mentioned, full day workshop at SC Asia in Singapore. That'll be the week after the hackathon. And then in May of next year, we think the week of the 5th, I'll finalize it in the next few days, we'll be at CSC in Helsinki for a hackathon, probably similar to the one in Kobe in terms of the participation, but we hope to bring in more discipline science groups. We proposed an ISC workshop. And then the week of July 28th, we are going to have a large-scale workshop that will start with a hackathon, include an all-day set of tutorials for introduction and intermediate, and then a 2.5-day conference like we did in Barcelona with plenaries and keynotes and breakouts for groups. We expect, because we're doing it in the Bay Area, that we will probably begin to see more participation from some of the AI companies. I'm having conversations with several of them already who want to help us in hosting that event. So that event may be 300 or 400 people, and more information will come out from that. And then we'll do another hackathon in the fall, either in the US or Europe, and then SC Asia in January of 26. We will be a full-fledged track, TPC track within the SCA Asia agenda. So let me stop there, and thank you for your time, and open it up for questions.
Thank you, Charlie, very much for your presentation. We have a few questions here. I can let me start with this one. Is it open to both academic and industry people?
Yes, we encourage participation from national laboratories, organizations like foundations that are doing scientific work, from industry as well as from academia. And we have people involved from all of those sectors, as well as organizational members from all of those sectors as well.
Okay, and what should be the first step of someone who wants to join TPC in general or specific work group?
So for anyone that wants to join, at the bottom of every web page at tpc.dev, tpc.dev, the website, is a link that says join us, or maybe it says join our Slack. And it's a simple form that you fill out that you have to give us an organizational email address so that we can trace every person to an actual organization. So no Gmail or Hotmail, which are effectively anonymous. So you fill that form out. If you want more information, there's a box you can check, and what you'll get is an email with a copy of these slides. So, and usually within 1 or 2 weeks, we turn around and get you onto the mailing list, and then an invitation into the Slack space. Once in the Slack space, there's a README channel that can help you navigate.
Okay, thank you. I have a question here on IP. How do you handle or share new IP that is created during a research that was conducted under TPC?
Great question. TPC is, as I mentioned, it's a grassroots organization. So you could think of TPC as a ongoing birds of a feather, if you will, that you would engage in at a professional conference or otherwise, where we expect every individual who interacts to just behave in ways that are normal and ethical in the academic research world. Joining the TPC Slack or having an organization join as a member doesn't cost any money. It doesn't require you to share anything that you're not comfortable or unable to share. If there is IP that's created, I think you would think of it in a similar fashion that you came together and found a collaboration at NeurIPS or ISC or some other conference, and then you worked with some other people to develop some IP. The ownership and the terms of that IP are between you and your collaborators, not the conference. So if you meet someone or do some work at TPC that results in intellectual property, then you would interact with your colleagues that you met and are working with about that IP as you would if TPC didn't exist and you met in some other venue. TPC isn't involved in managing those collaborations or putting any restrictions on the rules of engagement beyond what you bring as your own organization. Does that help?
I hope it helps for the person that asked that question. The next question is, what about TPC and robotics?
Well, we do have a number of projects that I'm aware of that those who are involved in TPC are doing. We have a self-driving laboratory project at Argonne, for example. We don't yet have a working group in TPC to look at robotics. And that is only because what is required to create a working group is a couple of people from multiple institutions need to come together and say, let's create a working group on this. Here's a paragraph of what we're going to try to do so people know whether they want to join us or not. We give them a Slack channel and they carry on. So while there isn't yet a working group on robotics, we do expect that this will probably change as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Someone is asking, is there a thought about understanding drug interaction testing?
There is actually quite a bit of discussion around the use of AI for drug design and interaction testing and protein interactions and other things. And this is probably, as I mentioned already, the life sciences field and the working group in TPC is one of the more active domain areas. And there is, in addition to the general bioinformatics working group, there are a couple of folks from NIH and some of the cancer institutes that are trying to boot up a cancer drugs working group. That's just in its formative stages. We gave them a Slack channel, and so we hope that they'll start to come together in the next few months.
Okay, interesting. The next question is it a voluntary consortium? If yes, how one can fund participating workshop abroad?
So what was the second part?
About funding. Is it basically a self-funded research, or is there any funding resource for the workshop work group?
I get that question every day. I just got that question yesterday from some of the folks at Argonne who are leading a working group, and they said, "Are you going to pay for my travel?" And the answer is pretty simple: no. So this is a self-funded participation, but we also recognize that there are many places that you can go to spend what's most important is your time, but also your travel funds. And scientists have to pick those. One of the things that we're doing in the U.S., and I'm not up to date on what's happening in this regard in Japan or other countries, but in the U.S. and in the European Union, we have a couple of proposals that we've been preparing. One that will go in to the European Commission in the next few weeks, where the Barcelona Supercomputer Center has brought together a consortium of people from Cineca in Italy and CSC in Finland, LRZ in Germany, so supercomputing centers from around Europe, where they think that they will be able to get on the order of $500,000 a year over 3 years to support the Trillion Parameter Consortium participation from Europeans. So part of that will be travel assistance for Europeans to participate in TBC. How they will handle that isn't yet decided in terms of how do you apply for assistance. We do have an emphasis on when at the point that we have resources available for this kind of thing, we will most certainly be trying to focus them toward early career or mid-career people to help them to grow into the community. In the United States, I've been working with a few colleagues on a proposal that we hope to get funding from multiple potential federal sources to support the same sort of thing. So not necessarily to support the administration of TPC, but to support a broader participation by helping people with travel.
Okay, thank you. Could you give a few directions on specific research needed in the area of energy and electric vehicles?
You know, that is outside of my expertise. However, there is a report that came out just within the last few months from a number of DOE laboratories that met in several workshops specifically on the question of AI for energy research. And if you go to if you Google Argonne AI reports, you'll find a page. It's not the only one because there are multiple labs involved, but you'll find a page where you can download that report as well as the two that I mentioned. So there's an entire report on that that's pretty fresh.
Okay, thank you. Is there a group dealing with HPC for HPC for AI?
There's a couple. There are a couple of groups that either have formed or are forming around topics related to high-performance computing. First of all, I would say that generally speaking, we think of TPC, the community, as largely the overlap between high-performance computing and AI because of the emphasis on scale. At the Barcelona meeting, one of the companies that's building AI hardware came to me and said, we want to run a parallel session on AI hardware acceleration at scale. And I said, that would be great, but if it's just your company, that's an advertisement. But if you bring in three other companies, then we'll do it. And they were able to do that. So they had, I think, 4 or 5 companies that build AI hardware came together around this topic of AI hardware acceleration at scale. It was one of the more highly attended breakouts at the Barcelona meeting. I think they had 70 or 80 people. So that told us that there was a great interest in that. And we're encouraging those same leaders to continue that and form an official working group. The other one that has been forming and involves Valerie Taylor from Argonne and a few other people, Pete Beckman as well from Argonne, is a working group around the use of large language models for scientific software development. And they began in Barcelona with a discussion of experiences to date trying to use AI models to develop or optimize or parallelize or port scientific codes. So that group has a fair amount of momentum and would welcome more people joining. Beyond that, many of the groups deal with specific things like the software stack or pipelines and tools in the context of the work they're doing. For example, the data pipelines group that has discussions that range from deduplication, optimization, to PDF interpretation software, to training and benchmarks and other aspects. And so there are important topics there, such as the optimization of a given workflow tool or framework on HPE hardware or on IBM or other hardware. We don't yet have a group around that topic of software stacks on major architectures, but that would be probably a popular group if somebody were to propose and lead it.
And joining one of the groups that you just mentioned is by filling out the forms in the website?
You fill out the form on the website, that will get you access to the Slack workspace. And specifically, I'm talking but to you as the community in Israel. That's not a worldwide offer. I'll just leave it there. But that will get you access to the Slack workspace. And within that workspace, joining a working group simply means you join that public channel that the working group is part of, and you join the discussions.
Charlie, can I follow up with a subsequent question?
Sure.
You mentioned quite a few HPC centers or, I don't know, large-scale computation centers that are taking part in this consortium. So what is the interplay between a group of researchers that would like to explore some scientific question and those providers of compute infrastructure? Is there any way of I don't know, mediating those, allocating CPU cycles for specific projects, and so on and so forth?
That's a great question. And that's also a common question. We don't have TPC resources to allocate, but we have been, because so many HPC centers are involved, and they're involved because they think they can offer, they can work with the community to improve their services that they offer. We have had some preliminary discussions with some of them about at least getting access to accounts and small allocations for testing purposes. And this, in fact, is fairly common at almost any of the HPC centers, that you can get a exploratory grant of a small number of CPU or GPU hours. So we haven't yet gotten a coordinated effort going there, but that is something that has come up sort of, I would say, on our to-do list to work with a few of these. It came up at the hackathon at Argonne. Turned out that the easiest thing to do at the hackathon was for people, so our machine model architecture and performance group actually split up into 6 subgroups at the hackathon, each of which was going to run some benchmarks and tests. And rather than, even though they were about 200 meters from Aurora, our supercomputer, and other machines that are fairly large, turned out the easiest thing for them to do was to use accounts they already had at Argonne and other sites. So that works, but it would have been ideal if we had had a group allocation that could be used, and then a sort of tutorial on how to come up to speed quickly. So we think that will start to come together probably before the Kobe hackathon, which will be hosted at Riken, where they have Fugaku and other machines. Yeah, so that's something that we think that TPC can sort of help with.
Thank you. The next question, is there any group dealing with AI in education? I also saw another question about AI in social sciences.
There isn't a group that's doing AI outside of the large scale. So I wanted to say AI in the small, but that's not necessarily the case with every discipline. But where a discipline is not needing large scale AI, we don't really see much engagement. Haven't seen social sciences or education, unless by education you mean training and expanding the AI community, in which case we do have a working group that began in Barcelona that's been spinning up. It's got people from Chinica, Argonne, and I believe it's Riken that's the Barcelona Supercomputer Center, to develop a training program that can be offered through TPC, which would take individuals or organizations that have training materials, bring them together so that if you come to a large-scale TPC meeting, you can get the best of what's available with respect to training.
Mm-hmm. And is there any research group focusing on trauma and PTSD or CPTSD in a psychological context?
Not that I have seen. I know that just thinking of our own context of Chicago and some of the universities here, that there's quite a bit of work in neuroscience and in every dimension, but we haven't seen their interaction with TPC. So I'll just leave it at that. It's a grassroots community, and those roots have not yet maybe noticed us to join us.
Mm-hmm. By the way, if anyone has an idea for research or for a working group, is it possible to publish it somehow on any platform of TPC and create a working group?
I regularly get requests from people who say, I want to start a group or a discussion around this topic. And my response is always, who is your co-lead? And encouraging them to find 2 co-leaders from outside of their organization and to develop at least a few paragraphs that would tell an individual whether this group is doing something that is relevant to me and whether I want to join this group. Unfortunately, and maybe this is sort of universal with people, unfortunately, a lot of those requests sort of stop right there because the person has a great idea, and what they're really saying, it would be great if somebody else ran a working group that I could join around this idea. And it's much harder if I have to create it myself. So I value those suggestions, and I try to work with those individuals because this is one of the places that we want to emphasize in TPC is if you are aspiring to lead a discussion, we will do what we can to help you do that.
Okay. The next question is, can you elaborate on TPC and AI hardware acceleration on the edge, DNN implementation on low power edge devices?
You know, I love this question because my own research is AI at the edge, but we don't have, and maybe this is because I haven't done it, we don't have a working group with AI at the edge, but I do know that my colleagues who are working in this area are interested in that sort of discussion, but at the TPC gatherings so far in that community tend to be the HPC people more so than the edge people. So I love this question because that means there's somebody else out there that's interested in the same sort of research that I do. So I would love to hear from the person and let's talk further about how we can get our research community engaged with TPC.
And can you repeat on the best way to reach out?
Yes, you can email me directly. I think you've got my email address.
Yeah.
I'll put it on the title slide before I share the final slides with you. And you can also go to the form that's at the link at the bottom of every page of the website.
All right, thank you. That's it for now. Thank you, Charlie, for this productive and valuable conversation. I really appreciate this. And again, we will put the recording webinar online, and we'll share the presentation with contact information. So anyone who wants can reach out. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. Wish you all best of luck with collaborating with Trillion Parameter Consortium. And we look forward to see how things will work out.
Yes, thank you for having me. And please do explore the website because we try to publish our reports and have all the slides posted there. So there's a lot that you can get just from the website. I look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thank you very much.